Just check the microphone's working. That sounds good. Okay. More operationally feasible. The blue. Okay, so it's the same region covered, we just don't cover with the same density of stations as nymphs. So as I was mentioning, compared to other areas, including adjacent areas, the catch rates are relatively low, even on the best stations. The best stations from this survey do not have anywhere near the weight per unit effort from the best stations in other regulatory areas. So for purposes of running the survey, we divided into 3 regions. So here we've got the 3 regions broken down for a comparison of 2015 and 2006. We have the St. George region in the south, and where we have in 2006 we had 17 pounds per skate, and a little lower in 2015, 14.6 pounds per skate. St. Paul, we had much higher catch rates in 2015 than 2006, almost double. St. Matthew, pretty much the reverse. Average out to be almost the same, exactly the same weight per unit effort as 2006, where we had 16.9 pounds per skate. 2015, we had 16.3 pounds per skate. Now, as I mentioned, for the purposes of calibration, we don't use all of those stations. And for the purposes of calculating weight per unit effort, we omit a couple of other pairs as well, which, while they're shallower than 75 fathoms, they fall within other regions for the purposes of counting, accounting for all the weight per unit effort pieces. 2 stations fall within area 4A, and another pair of stations are in the area that say Matthew Island, which has its own annual survey stations. So if we omit those stations for the purposes of the weight per unit effort we actually use for the index each year, 2006 value was 12.4 pounds per skate, and the 2015 value was higher at 15.8 pounds per skate. Now that's not the bottom line, because we make some standardizations, as Ian mentioned earlier, such as in particular the competition standardization. I'll talk a little bit about the effect of that in 2015 later in the talk. So what are we going to do with the 2015 data? Well, there are 2 parts of this, as I mentioned. We want to see if we can revise the calibration curve that we estimated from the 2006 data and update the scaling factor. First part, the calibration revision. So we can estimate a calibration curve now for 2 years, 2006 and 2015, separately for the 2 data sets. Now if the curves are similar and their effect on similar shape and their effect on the troll time series is small, then it's reasonable to compute a new calibration curve from the combined data sets. Otherwise, we'd have to come up with some sort of transition between the 2006 curve and the 2015 curve. Something changed in between that time, in between those 2 surveys. Perhaps it's difficult to understand in the way that the setline survey fishes relative to the troll survey, and we'd have to come up with some sort of transition between those. So the calibration itself, what it's attempting to do is turn the troll survey data into something that looks more like the setline survey data. This figure shows the length frequency distributions for the troll in the dark bars for 2006 and 2015, and the setline survey in the light bars. With the calibration, what we're trying to do is scale down those big bars on the left-hand side, basically to 0, and scale up the ones on the right-hand side so they match the frequency shape that we get for the setline survey. So each individual fish ends up getting scaled. A fish that would be less than 50 centimeters long would be scaled to 0. It wouldn't count anything towards our index because we don't catch those fish on the setline survey. Whereas fish that are 100 centimeters or 90 centimeters, relative to those smaller fish, they'd be scaled up. So once we do that, we can do that with the left-hand data set and the right-hand data set separately. We can compare the time series that we get from those 2 separate calibrations. And it turns out they give practically the same thing in terms of the time series, in terms of the time trend. Here we have the 2015 values on the y-axis, the right axis, and on the x-axis below we have the 2006 values. They pretty much fall on as close to a straight line as you could hope for. And these are the 2 time trends that we would get for the troll time series for the 2006 calibration and the 2015 calibration. As far as the trend goes, those are practically the same thing. You wouldn't be able to come up with a meaningful difference between those. They both, and in particular, in recent years, they both show the same uptick in troll weight per unit effort. They are different in scale, but that's not important. Scaling is done in the next step by scaling the 2 time series by the relative ratio of the setline survey to the troll in the years in which we run the setline survey. So the upper time series would be scaled less than the lower time series, and they meet to be pretty much the same thing. So as the second part, the scaling revision, going to go through a similar process. We'll calculate the scaling factors from 2006 and 2015. And these will convert the calibrated troll time series into a predicted setline survey time series in pounds per skate. If, again, there's no clear difference between the scaling factors, we can reasonably use the average between them. Otherwise, we'd have to come up with some sort of ramp, some sort of transition between the 2 scaling factors between 2006 and 2015. Here are the 2 troll time series, calibrated troll time series, now in setline survey units of pounds per skate, scaled using the 2006 scaling factor and the 2015 scaling factor. The 2006 scaling factor there was 36.3. That's the number we multiply this series by to get it so that the 2006 value equals 12.4 pounds per skate, which we got in the setline survey, and everything else is scaled by exactly the same amount. Or for 2015, which are the blue triangles, the 2006 with the black circles with the black lines, 43. So a little higher in 2015 than 2006. But the variability in these things is very high. We don't have precise estimates of those, and the difference between those two scaling factors is well within the amount of variability that we're getting in those estimates and the precision of the estimates. So based on that, we really don't have a reason to use separate scaling factors for each of the 2 years. It's quite reasonable from looking at this that we come up with an average scaling factor, which gives us a more precise scaling factor by combining those two data sources too. Those bars, by the way, are the approximate 95% confidence intervals for each point in the time series. So in summary, use of a 2006 or a 2015 calibration curve has a minimal effect on the trend. If we use a 2006 or a 2015, we pretty much get the same understanding of what trend in area 4S in the Eastern Bering Sea is. So, and for the scaling, the 2015 scaling factor was slightly higher than the 2006 scaling factor, but that difference was small compared to the amount of variability. It didn't make a big difference to the time series. So our recommendations, which were accepted by the SRB, was to combine the 2006 and 2015 data for estimating the calibration curve, and to scale the trawl weight per unit effort using the mean of the two scaling factors from 2006 and 2015. This is kind of the best we could have hoped for from this. We didn't know going into this if we were going to get something completely different in 2015, which would have complicated our understanding of the relationship between these two surveys and made the analysis certainly more complicated. But this is very reassuring. It provides a lot of reassurance that the trawl survey is actually providing us with a consistent index of weight per unit effort in this area, and we feel more comfortable going forwards that this is doing what we think it's doing. The final index that we get using the combined calibration and the average scaling is this. This is the trawl time series in pounds per skate. The 2015 observation and the 2006 observation are the direct observations from the setline survey, 12.4 pounds per skate in 2006, 15.8 pounds per skate in 2015. Now, I'll emphasize this point again, but this increase at the end is not driven by the new data this year. This is something we were observing in the trawl survey anyway. Trawl survey was going to go up this year regardless of whether we had this new data added to it. And we'll see that illustrated again in a minute when I look at the apportionment effect. This new data just basically provided us with more reassurance that what we're getting is something reasonable. The stock assessment uses, so that was 032 weight per unit effort. The stock assessment uses total numbers per unit effort, and that's what this time series looks like, which is a bit different. In particular, the most recent part of the series is, as far as the trawl survey goes, near historic highs for numbers per unit effort. And this goes back to 1982 for the trawl survey. Now, this is not the only part of the 4CD index which we use for apportionment and other purposes. But in recent years, it's been driving, area 4S has been driving the index. This shows in biomass units, the biomass index for 4CD broken down into its components. Now, the biomass index for an area is its weight per 032 weight per unit effort multiplied by the bottom area. So while area 4S, Eastern Bering Sea, has a low weight per unit effort, it has a very large bottom area. So you can see in recent years, area 4S, so I'll go through go through the bars. The bottom bar, the darkest bar at the bottom, is the 4D edge, which we survey annually. Then there are a couple of bars, small bars for the small regions around the area 4D and the 4C islands. And the largest bar in the recent years is area 4S, the Eastern Bering Sea, and the bar at the top is 4N, the area that we've never surveyed, but we use other data sources to come up with an index for. But the 4S area has dominated in recent years as catch rates in those other areas that we survey on an annual basis have come down dramatically in the mid-2000s and more slowly in recent years. Although there is an uptick in everything in 2015. So this calibration was really important. Why we have good information in some of these other components, except for 4N, it's really important that we got that we feel more confident in the information we got from area 4S, because it is really driving the series right now. Apportionment. Okay, so all of this flows through to the apportionment process. So here I've got some comparisons of the apportionment done with different parts of the data added. So the first part here, first row here is the 2015 apportionment, straight 2015 apportionment. I've added an extra decimal place from what you usually see because some of these changes are quite small and hard to see unless you present the data more accurately. So for CDE in 2015, we estimated had 11.95% of the coastwide biomass. If we'd done the 2016 apportionment without this new data that we got in 2015, we would have got 14.5% of the biomass. It would have gone up even without the calibration. Now, what was a little surprising to us when I first ran these numbers is that when you add the new setline survey data, it doesn't actually go up by quite as much as that. We get 13.57% of the biomass. The reason is that the new data, while it provided a higher index value, that 15.8 pounds per skate, as I mentioned, that's not the bottom line for apportionment. We have these adjustment factors that we use. And it turns out in 2015, our estimate of hook competition was much lower than it was in 2006. So hook competition we measure by how many baits we get back on the survey. We get a lot of baits back, then there was less competition for the baits, there were fewer bycatch species. There was more chance for halibut to be caught. If we have very few baits back and we get lots of bycatch species, then those halibut that were in the water were competing for those baits with other species, including other halibut. And so our catch may have been depressed because of that competition. So that's the idea behind that. In 2015, we got about twice as many baits back on our cert-line survey in the Eastern Bering Sea than we did in 2015. And so that's why the difference is not quite as large. The apportionment is not quite as large in 2016 using that more complete data set than what we would have had without the new data set. So the new data set provides us with better information, though. It's providing us with a direct observation. There's no need for calibration in 2015. So we are using the best data we can for the apportionment that we've got. The last row there is something I'm going to be talking about and with a few slides at the end. We actually made a small adjustment in Area 2A this year, made some minor differences to apportionment. The differences are negligible in pretty much every area except Area 2A. I'll be talking about what we did there in a minute. As far as 4CDE goes, it's in the second decimal place. You wouldn't notice it. So our expansion of the survey rolls on in 2016. We hope to expand in the 4CDE edge. We have some gaps in coverage there. We have some better updated bathymetry data now that perhaps have allowed us to get a better handle on where we can put stations than when the survey was first designed. So we have some gaps around the southern part of the edge and in the middle there. And also, largest area we haven't surveyed was the northern part of the 4D edge, right up to the exclusive economic zone boundary with Russia. So we plan to put some stations in there on the standard 10 nautical mile grid in 2016 to see what's there. 2017 will be Area 4B, which is probably the most interesting area we've got left, and then we'll be mopping up with the remaining areas 2B, 2C, 3A, 3B in subsequent years. So the second short part of this talk is an adjustment we made to Area 2A in 2015. One of our goals with compiling the Setline Survey Index and then doing the apportionment is to ensure we're including all halibut wherever they are, however few of them there are. So we are including stuff in the northern Bering Sea, where we estimate there's probably a catch rate of 5 to 8 pounds per skate in an average year, pretty low. But we're making use of some data sources to deal with that. One little gap that we've had where we've never surveyed is the very southern part of Area 2A in sort of the southern part of Northern California. So the Area 2 Setline survey has fished as far south as 39 degrees north, which we did in the survey expansion in 2014. But other platforms for catching halibut have found halibut south of there. The NEMS Troll survey has caught some southern halibut. West Coast observers have picked up halibut as far south as Morro Bay, and not very many, but they've been caught south of there. So ideally we'd like to include these in our assessment of halibut in our indices. So probably the best data source, well certainly the best data source we have for doing this would be the NEMS Troll survey, which is again an annual survey like the survey in the Eastern Bering Sea. Doesn't come up with quite the same quality of information. We don't have the length frequency data that we could use for a direct calibration. But we're interested to see if we can make some use of this data to index the southern area 2A. So a question was, well, can this data be used to make an index? And the answer turns out to be, well, yeah, sort of, but not very well. So this shows the southern part of area 2A. Shows where red in our set-laden survey stations in 2014, going all the way down to 39 degrees south in Northern California. And beyond there, to the southern limit of where the Troll survey since 2003 has caught a halibut. And it's caught one halibut down at around 37.8 degrees north. So we use that as our cutoff. So there's some Troll stations in that area. We get some data from that area. We get some data from the northern area. How do these, at least where the surveys overlap, how do they compare? Is the Troll index giving us the same, Troll halibut index giving us something similar to what the Setline survey index is giving? If they are, then we probably feel pretty comfortable using the Troll index as an annual index for halibut in the southern area too. Well, it's not doing anything of the kind. There is basically no relationship between the Troll index in the areas that overlap and the Setline survey index. So here's a plot of the Troll on the y-axis and the Setline on the x-axis. So what's going on here? Well, the Troll index actually doesn't catch very many halibut. It's not a very good platform for fishing halibut. In the years in which they did count halibut and length them, which was from 2003 to 2006, for the data that we have, and the current design of the Troll survey, they caught between 10 and 60-something halibut per year for the entire survey. Whereas the Setline survey is catching hundreds of halibut, sometimes over 1,000 halibut for the same area. So when you're catching so few halibut, it doesn't take much for the numbers to just bounce around at random. You happen to hit a patch one year and you get 10 extra halibut, and you happen to miss the patches another year and your index is close to zero. There's a lot of random variability in the Troll index, hence we have this kind of relationship. So what can we do with it? Well, what the Troll data are telling us is, at least at the most basic level, that catches in the very southern part of 2A are very low. Catch rates there are much lower than they are in the northern part of area 2A that we cover by the Setline survey on average. So at the very least, we can use the ratio of those two indexes to come up with some sort of relative index for the southern area 2A. So we calculated the average ratio of the Troll weight per unit effort in the region not covered by the Setline survey to the region covered by the Setline survey, which gave us this value of around 10% weight per unit effort in the southern area relative to the northern area. And in recent years, 10% comes out to about 2 pounds per skate. And so we can use that to scale the northern index, the index that we get from the Setline survey itself, to account for the southern halibut. Oops. So what we're doing there is we're going to be scaling the weight per unit effort from our standard index downwards a little bit to account for that. But at the same time, we're increasing the bottom area that we use for our calculations. So the bottom area previously went down to 39 degrees north, and now we're shifting it down to 37.75 degrees north. As I mentioned, the most southern halibut on the Troll survey was at 37.8. We've got a little buffer in there. So that takes us down to San Francisco Bay. And so the bottom area is increased, the weight per unit effort scaled down. Overall, you're adding a little piece to what we had before. And the increase is about 3% in terms of biomass units over what we had previously. And that is basically what we got for the increase in apportionment estimated for Area 2A in 2015 from adding these new areas. Something close to a 3% increase in its share of coastwide biomass. Okay, so that covers our changes to the Setline survey indices, our expansions that we did in 2015, and I'll be happy to take questions.
Thank you, Ray. Let's see if there are commission questions. Don.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm quite pleased that the Bering Sea expansion survey is completed. It's a big project, and it's just terrific to be able to have information, even though it's been 9 years since we've had the previous survey. It's still an accomplishment, and I really appreciate the effort of staff. I'm looking at the report that was handed out to the commissioners, and I want to discuss a little bit about Table 2. And I don't know if we can make that available on the screen or not. It's the results, size samples, numbers of halibut, and length between the 2006 and 2015 trawl surveys. Anyway, a summary of that table, when I first looked at that, is the numbers of fish in the trawl survey in 2006 between the trawl survey of 2015. And the trawl survey reports that the 2015 trawl survey was less than half the numbers of fish found in 2006 just in the trawl survey. When I further looked at that, the decrease in fish, the most profound decrease in fish, were in the smaller sizes, the 20 to 25 centimeter. In 2006, a 20 to 25 centimeter fish, which is a tiny little fish, dropped from almost 1,500 fish to 10. Now, I don't know if that's significant, but I'm wondering, did the trawl survey protocols change? Was there some difference between this trawl survey done in 2006 that could explain why it's not now catching the 20 to 25 centimeter fish? As an example, as you go up through the size ranges, you can see that there's been significant less small fish caught between the two trawl surveys. And it's a very small snapshot of the Bering Sea, but it's profound to me. Then I think we need to explore why that might be. The significant drop in the catch of small fish over those two survey periods in the trawl survey. At the same time, the longline survey, which catches bigger fish, from that table, you know, the selectivity between the two gear types starts appearing at about 60, 65 centimeters. And then the long line gear starts catching those fish. So you can see a little bit of overlap. But at the same period, the larger fish, there was more larger fish in 2015 in those Bering Sea Flat survey there was in 2006. So there's a disconnect there that I'm trying to understand. Why there is 50% less small fish and you know, 25 or 30% larger fish. And I'm going to go back just a little bit to the SPR presentation that Dr. Motel gave yesterday about if you want to have yield, then protect the small fish. And for some reason, it appears from this table, and again, it's just a small snapshot, that there's a lot of small fish that aren't there this summer that were there in 2006. And I just would like to explore that. Any hypothesis of why that might be?
Very interesting question. I noticed this right away as well. And that wasn't a change from 2006 to 2015, or at least it wasn't a gradual change. I put up the figure that is based on that table. It shares the same information as the table that Commissioner Lane refers to. So you can see in the 2006 on the left-hand side, the numbers from 20 to 25 centimeters, or this might be 10 centimeter bins here, are extremely high in 2006 and basically disappear in 2015. That didn't happen slowly over 9 years. That happened from 2006 to 2007. And we do report these data in our annual report on the NIMS Bering Sea Trawl Survey, but those fish seem to show up in 1 year. They weren't there the year before and they weren't there the year after. And I don't have any theories for what's going on there. I don't know if the NIMS folks discussed it at the time. Ian might have an idea. Thank you, Ian.
Good morning. The SRB actually had us do quite a bit of inspection of the NIMS trawl survey data as part of the models that we've built to look particularly at the Bering Sea and also as part of a more spatial analysis of these data. In fact, the inconsistency that you're seeing there is quite consistent with the age structure of the data that we see from the NIMS trawl survey. So those fish in 2006 that were quite small we've actually tracked those. If we're looking at the age structure, which we'll have a figure in our RARA showing the age structure as observed from the trawl survey. Those young fish in 2006 were roughly 2 years old, and that what appears to be a strong cohort in the Bering Sea has actually moved through the population, and now we're seeing them in our set line survey. And so that difference, that change from seeing a lot of small fish in 2006 to seeing bigger fish in 2015, it's actually the same fish. So it's not so much that we are seeing very few small halibut in 2015, it's that in 2006 we saw a lot of small halibut, and they were seen in the NIPS trawl survey, and we've seen those work their way up through the age structure in the Bering Sea, and we're now actually seeing them in the set line survey as well as in the trawl survey itself. So it's actually quite consistent, and when you look at the change in the age structure, it's in fact the same fish that are moving up through. The reason why numerically there are fewer of them now is because they've got a decade of natural mortality that's occurred. So they're not present in the same absolute abundance in numbers, although their biomass has actually increased over that time period.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you for that. That helps a lot. Try to understand. Again, I'm looking at 2 columns on my table and a small snapshot. So I appreciate the explanation. I'm still wondering why there aren't more small fish in this 2015 trawl survey. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other commissioner questions? Paul.
Thanks very much for the report, Ray. It was quite interesting to see the comparison between the two, and I'm sure you're pleased by the outcome. I'm thinking, maybe I missed it, but what is the future plan as far as doing any further work there? Is it like another 10 years down the road, or have you thought about that?
Can't say I've given a lot of thought. We have our planned survey expansions going out for another 3 or 4 years. These are my thoughts, nothing official. These are so consistent, and that the trawl index was going to give us something pretty reasonable even without this new expansion. I feel pretty comfortable leaving this for a number of years. 10 years, I don't know. We'll keep tracking the trawl survey, see what it's doing, see if we have any evidence of any inconsistencies or something changing. We can look at what the data are doing in the areas that we are surveying each year. And I guess it'll also be motivated by needs for accurate data in Area 4 CDE. It probably depends somewhat on catch limits in that area and how much of a difference new data might make to that. In this case, we thought that going into this, these data were really important and had the potential to make quite a bit of a difference, had quite an effect on the index. I think the urgency is gone now. I think we can at least feel comfortable for the next few years, but that's something we'll have to discuss.
Bob.
So Ray, yesterday I asked Dr. Stewart a question. He suggested I hold off till today and lay it on you today. So, so the question I had was, we had a positive uptick in the assessment for CD&E, and how much of this calibration attributed to that uptick, if any?
Well, it's a little complicated by the different pieces that go into the calibration. The trawl survey was increasing anyway. We would have got a higher value from the weight per unit effort even if we didn't have these data, as this table shows. And in fact, that value would have been even higher still than the one we got. So while the raw index, the 15.8 pounds per skate that we get from the survey, is higher than the corresponding raw index, without the standardizations for competition and so on, that we would have got from the trawl survey without the new data. So we would have had a little bit of an uptick just from the direct observation. Factoring in the hook competition brought it down a bit. So really, the difference isn't great between the two, and I think we're getting a fairly consistent value between what we've got. But considering all the noise that you can get in these data series, the amount of variability you've got in the estimates, I think we've got a very consistent picture from the trawl survey and from our snapshot setline survey this year. So.
David.
Just following up a little bit on Don's earlier question, is there any evidence that that big cohort of little fish from 2006 has moved out of the Bering Sea? Can you see any blips anywhere else?
Well, I'll ask Ian to talk about that, but I think the short answer is no. We haven't seen them. In fact, we had an abundance of 9-year-olds show up in the Gulf this year, which is the wrong year class for that. But Ian, do you want any other comments?
Yeah, just my last question. I'm trying to understand the graph up there. So the proportion on the side, that number is a proportion of the total biomass? Is that how you read that? It's a proportion
of the number of fish caught. So the 4,270 fish that we caught in 2006, that's the proportion that were from 0 to 10 centimeters, 10 to 20 centimeters, 20 to 30 centimeters. So you can see from 20 to 30 centimeters, something like 45% of the fish were in that length category, which is consistent with the table that you've been citing as well. So almost half the fish were from 20 to 30 centimeters in 2006.
So thanks, Ray. That's good. So maybe on this theme a little bit, you pointed out how you try to make everything below 50 go to 0. Which
the data.
I understand your point, but it strikes me that the trawl survey has a great amount of information about fish less than 60, and you do it every year. So I wonder if you have in your head some of the things that the Halibut Commission uses this trawl survey for other than the index, because I know you use the platform for tagging and stuff like that, so all that information is not lost just because it doesn't match the survey. And if nothing comes to mind, maybe you can think about it for the annual meeting to show that this is a use. If it is useful, I'd be interested in it.
Well, I'm going to say two things, and other people will know much more about this than me. This is reported each year in our RARA, so the data are there for people to inspect and understand. But I understand that Steve Martell is looking at some of these data, trawl indices, including small fish, with a view to possibly working out an index that you can use for abundance-based PSC limits. Is that correct, Steve? Yeah. So there is some potential future use of these. Ian has something to add for maybe current use of these data.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's actually two uses of the data. One that we're currently doing, which is that the trawl survey provides us access to sex-specific weighted age for small halibut that we don't get access to from any of our other survey platforms or from the commercial fishery. And that information is essential for turning the length frequency distributions collected by observers into age frequency distributions to help us understand year class strength. And so we're doing that right now. We're using that information to convert the length frequencies from bycatch into age distributions, as well as to calculate the mean weighted age for the younger halibut that we don't see from other sources. So in that regard, this is our sole source of information, and we're making use of those young fish to do that. The second piece that we're not currently doing, but we're working toward, and Jimmy and Ellie alluded to this yesterday, one of the things we've been working with the SRB over the last year and a half is to try to better understand what the trends in the Bering Sea are telling us. And we started by building a Bering Sea only model and evaluated that. Problem is that fish move in and out of the Bering Sea. And so then the next extension of that was to look at the Bering Sea Trawl Survey Index of Abundance as a recruitment index for the entire coastwide stock. And it turns out that not all the recruits occur in the Bering Sea, and so that's also a noisy comparison. But we agreed this year that the next priority is to continue working on a spatial model, because we do think that the Trawl Survey Index provides a good index of juvenile abundance in the Bering Sea itself, and we can make use of those data in a spatial context if we have that area identified. So we're using these data in several ways, and we've got some, I think, some really some new ways on the horizon as well.
So that was my not very subtle way of pointing out we don't have NIF science and Halibut Commission science, but we have scientists working on the problems. So thank you. And I'm sorry for abusing the system by sneaking that in. Let's see. And Ray, I think you have something on next year's expansion. Is that correct?
Well, that was just one single slide I've already shown.
So that's
shows the 4D expansion. That's
okay. So you're finished. Thank you very much. And for the public, as before, we're taking commissioner questions after each of these sections, but the public will have a chance to comment or question at the end of the morning session. Steve.
There is just one question about the following on with Don's from the web, and that was a question for Dr. Stewart about where what bin those 2006 fish would show up in now that we're seeing them later in 2015. What size bin on table 2?
Those fish in table 2, that's the table of this figure.
This is, yeah.
So those fish would be around legal size right now. We would have expected to start seeing those in the commercial fishery actually a couple of years ago in small numbers and be increasing in abundance. Of course, a particular age class would have a distribution of lengths. And as Bruce mentioned in response to an earlier question, we haven't seen a very strong showing coast-wide of those 2 year classes, even though they've been quite prominent in the age structure in the Bering Sea. We've certainly been looking for them, and as I showed in the panel yesterday, looking at the 2015 age structure from several of the regulatory areas, there are a couple of areas, including Area 4 CD&E, which show a reasonably high abundance of 10 and 11-year-olds, which are the 2 year classes associated with that increase in the Bering Sea trawl catch. However, as Bruce noted, we've also seen quite a few 9-year-olds in this year's survey, which would be kind of surprising if we had really big 10 and 11-year-olds moving through. It would be surprising to see the year class behind them actually catching up already, because they've not appreciably changed the trends in many of these areas. So there's still, I think, a lot more questions with regard to the strength of these year classes. We are seeing some of the 10 and 11s in certain regulatory areas, but certainly not showing up everywhere. And interestingly, where they showed up the strongest in 2014 was actually Area 2. It's where we saw the strongest abundance of 10 and 11-year-olds. But it's hard to say whether those are the same recruits or not at this point. They could be.
Thanks very much, Ray. So I believe we'll have Ms. Gilroy on some regulatory proposals.
All right, I'll just be going through the regulation proposals that we've received. If you want to look at the full proposals, they're on our webpage under the annual meeting site and under regulation proposals. So I'll just touch briefly on each of them. The first one that we've received is to lower the commercial size limit to 30 inches. That's pretty self-explanatory. The second one we've received is to amend the 2A tribal fish ticket regulations to collect tribal ID number, not vessel ID number. And this really is what we're doing, but the regs are written so that it seems like we're asking for tribal number, but we really are getting, or a vessel number, but really are getting the tribal number. The next one is to revise the U.S.-Alaska logbook regulations, which currently say if you're fishing for halibut to have a logbook, and the request is to change it to a landing occurs. And you'll hear more about that one. We've been discussing this one internally and with agencies. We'll have comments on that, but look at that proposal, which is online. The next one is to establish a maximum size limit of 60 inches for both the commercial and sport fisheries. I believe this one was for coast-wide. And the last one is for the model to use a area by area model, not a coast-wide model. So those are all online, and you can see them in more detail, and those will be discussed at the annual meeting. And lastly, these aren't online, and we're just working on some of these currently with different agencies. The first one is to, IPHC needs to accept logbook to be used for halibut fishing, and this is just to amend the regulations to allow the NMFS e-log. In reality, we already it is allowed. This is just to make sure that people understand that it's allowed. We might have something else in the regs about just e-logs in general. We're working on that to see if there's a way to say that if somebody wants to bring an e-log forward to the commission would look at it and make a decision on it, but we're not specifically saying that. Right now we're specifically saying NIMS is the only e-log, but if one came forward it could be reviewed. And the last one that the staff has talked about, I guess this came up in the summer, that if a tag fish is caught sport fishing, which has a commission tag, then we're recommending that that not be included in the sport daily bag limit or the possession limits. This would mirror what happens in the commercial fishery. If a tag fish comes in, it's not part of their quota share. And we haven't actually talked to different agencies about this yet, but that's a proposal that we'll see. That's it so far.
Thank you, Heather. Any questions? Oh, Don, please.
Sorry. I just, to explain, to make sure that everybody's aware that at this point we're just presenting these proposals to you. We may have comments from the staff for your consideration at the annual meeting.
Well, that was going to be my question. I guess I had hoped that we'd have some background on all proposals, whether you think they should be out of hand rejected or out of hand accepted, but it isn't just a subset of them that you're going to look at. Is that correct?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, no. We would give you comments from the staff on all of the proposals we received.
Let's see, I think I had Don next and then Bob.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate your previous discussion. This is probably one of my last questions at this microphone, so I thought I'd take the opportunity. On the 60-inch size limit, maximum or size limit, I know that we have reverse slot limits in southeast Alaska, and then I think also in Canada I read that there was some size reverse slot or some measurements where they end up having to measure larger fish to decide whether they are keepers or not within the regulations. Do you have any input on what type of techniques they're using to accurately measure those fish? Are they leaving them in the water? Are they having to haul them up on the rail? Or I'm just looking for if there's anybody has any experience with that, those types of trying to get that measurement.
I don't know if anybody from the sport agencies are here, but I don't know how they're doing it. I do know that there's a program in Alaska that there's a research program that they're trying to take a picture of the head over when it's against the side of the rail and do an expansion from head length to body length. We've helped the person collect information. So I bet I don't know where that's at. I don't think that's been finalized yet, but.
I think the project is complete and they've sort of put the report out on that, but I don't know if it's planning on going forward.
So I don't think we'll solicit input from the audience, but perhaps we can discover for the annual meeting if there is some ability for a state or province to report on that.
So, Mr. Chairman, I have two questions or two thoughts. One is more clarification on the Alaska Longline Fishermen's Association, Heather, proposal. I don't quite understand what the nuance there is. I'm not picking it up in that short paragraph.
For number 3?
Yeah.
Currently, the regulations say fishing for halibut, and their concern is how do you define fishing for halibut? If that's their concern. We've had discussion in their proposal. They're incorrect to say that this affects subsistence fishers because the way the commission regulations are written, where the logbook proposal, the logbook information is, it is only for commercial fishers. So that is a non-issue. The proposal states that if you say fishing for halibut, then the skipper would need to know if all people aboard have IFQ. And in NIMS regulations, if you have halibut IFQ, if you have a person that holds halibut IFQ, you have to retain halibut. So that's a NIMS regulation. So if you're out fishing and there's a person aboard that holds IFQ, you need to retain halibut. So that's another point that's not correct in the proposal. So he's concerned that if you are fishing and you didn't catch a halibut, when do you start completing the logbook? Now we've been discussing it with enforcement. If it's tied to the landing, then when do you start to fill out the logbook? So it's kind of a complicated issue. We are trying to figure out the best way to deal with his concerns, but make sure that the person is filling out a logbook 24 hours after the fishing event occurs.
So follow-up question then. So I'm trying to figure out what the problem is. So I can understand having the logbook when you're targeting halibut, but maybe you're targeting blackcod and you're landing the incidental amount of halibut with it, which is required by NIMS regs. That's being recorded in the NIMS logbook. Or is this a rockfish problem, or do they identify where the problem, what kind of fishery they're talking about, where they think the problem is?
I think they're worried that it could be a problem. We've talked to enforcement. There were only 5 logbook warnings or 5 logbook problems in 2015. If the person is targeting black cod and retaining halibut, they have to keep a logbook, and we collect that information. So if there's a halibut retained, then a logbook needs to be filled out. If they're saying if they're targeting and catching 0 halibut, then they shouldn't have to fill out a logbook. We still collect that data because it's a data point that they've actually tried to catch halibut and caught 0. So whether the definition of fishing for halibut is the best way to do it, we haven't figured out a better way to define it. But several of the points aren't quite correct in the proposal. Okay, I don't know if Bruce wants. I haven't talked to Dan, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, I just contribute a little bit to that, and it's a very nuanced issue. Part of it is that if someone is, say, for example, fishing for sablefish, if they catch a halibut on there and there's an IFQ holder aboard here who has available IFQ for halibut, they have to retain that, and then there has to be a logbook for it. If they're just fishing for black cod, the perception is they're not fishing for halibut, so why should I be maintaining a halibut logbook for this? So that's part of the nuance behind this is if I'm fishing for sablefish, for example, then I'm not fishing for halibut, so I wouldn't start off keeping a logbook for halibut. So that's where some of the problems are in this, so this sort of nuances. If I actually do retain this, then does the logbook get triggered on point of landing because I'm landing some halibut, or is it the point of capture? And the answer is, under our regs, it's the point of capture, so there has to be a logbook for halibut filled out within 24 hours of that capture event.
So, Mr. Chairman, I do have a request for information on one of these, and I don't know when you want to take that up.
Do it right
On number 1, on the size limit, should the commission decide to go down this path and have a partial reg that is, let's say, everything west of Kodiak or everything west of Cape Spencer, there's going to be a enforcement issue as to what is this for boats that are allowed to fish in both areas. Right now we have a reg, and so I'm thinking that the size limit would be that allowed in a boat would be the lower size limit, but we need some information from law enforcement. I know they wouldn't like this idea I'm coming up with, but should we go down that path, we need law enforcement's review of that, and so I'm just giving a heads up that we need that sort of feedback at the annual meeting.
Just a point of clarification. So right now we don't have any, I don't think that proposal, an area-specific proposal, is what was made, I don't think, was it, Heather? So if there is a proposal like that, we would obviously seek guidance from NOAA in terms of what they felt was an enforceable regulation on that, Bob. But right now, we don't have something on the table on that.
It might come up, so and it could morph, and so I think we should have alert law enforcement that question may come up.
Is that okay? So I think reading between the lines, there may very well be some commission support for a 30-inch size limit, maybe in the Bering Sea or maybe in 4B. And so with that generic idea, is it possible to find from law enforcement what they think would be the enforcement issues if we had a 30-inch limit only for some specific area?
Yeah.
Okay, and then Bruce, you were going to add something perhaps to the conversation.
The only thing I was going to say is that right now we have there are provisions in the regulation for multiple area fishings, and there is either using a vessel identification system or segregation of the catch something. So that provision for some aspect of landing already exists. We'd have to, as you say, consult with NOAA enforcement to see what their views were on that. Thank you.
Anything else on Heather's part? Steve.
Excuse me. Thank you. We have 2 comments online. Linda Bankin notes that she had comments to make on the proposal number 3, but she writes that she thinks Bruce just clarified. Her question would be whether they are correct that a vessel owner would be out of compliance if he or she is fishing for sablefish, does not catch any halibut, does not fill out a halibut logbook, but one person on board the boat, vessel owner or deckhand, had unused halibut IFQs or holds unfished halibut IFQs. So I think that was what you were talking about, Heather.
Correct. That person would need to retain the halibut to be legal.
Okay. And then the other comment is from Jeff Farber, who says, it is our understanding that the number of trips where halibut is targeted but none are caught and landed are minimal, and IPHC does not otherwise collect or use logbook data from vessels where halibut is not targeted and landed. There seems to be no conservation or management purpose to require vessels not targeting or landing halibut to fill out an IPHC logbook. The requirement does, however, expose fishermen to potential violations and fines for missing or incorrectly filled out logbooks on trips where halibut is not the intended target or landed. So it's more discussion.
Okay, so I think dealing with that, it'll be part of the staff discussion when it comes back, when this comes up at the annual meeting. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Heather. I think we have one presentation from Chris Oliver on a potential North Pacific Council halibut issue.
Hello again. You should have this letter that I sent to Dr. Lehman last week, and this has to do with the retention of incidentally caught halibut in pot fisheries, and this is an issue that's bounced back and forth between the Commission in the context of the Council. Originally there was a proposal to the IPHC to allow halibut retention in pot gear, sablefish pot gear in Area 4A, and that went back and forth with the Commission, and ultimately, I'll jump to this part of my letter, ultimately the Council decided, basically tabled that based on analysis from the staff, the fact that there was in fact very few fishermen in that area that held halibut quota share, and in fact, based on public input, very little interest in pursuing that proposal. So the Council essentially tabled it. However, in the meantime, we've spent a lot of analysis and process over the last 2 years analyzing the allowance for longline pot gear in the Gulf of Alaska sablefish IFQ fishery, and that was largely to counteract whale depredation in those fisheries. So earlier this year, the Council approved that, allowing
longline pot gear in the Gulf sablefish fisheries, and it's the hope and I believe the intent of the agency to implement those regulations in time for the 2016 fisheries. One element of that Council's action was to allow the retention of incidentally caught legal-size halibut if they possess the necessary halibut quota, as is currently the case with hook and line gear. However, following through with that allowance would require complementary action by the Commission to essentially define pots as legal gear. As I understand that your regulations at Section 19 don't allow that. So the purpose of our letter is to highlight our action, request consideration of complementary action at your annual meeting, and to provide a bit of context for the different approaches that we've taken regarding incidental halibut retention. Our staff has prepared a discussion paper, which I just was posted yesterday, and I just sent to Bruce this morning. I apologize for not getting it to you sooner, Bruce. But they've prepared a discussion paper which discusses this issue, including the Area 4A consideration as well as the Council's action in the Gulf. And that will provide you a lot more background than I'm going to provide you right now. This is, I guess, a heads up because you're not going to make this decision until your annual meeting. It catalogs the correspondence that we've had on this issue, which dates all the way back to 2009. And in the meantime, I'm basically just trying to capture the primary intent of the Council is to avoid a situation where regulations require the discard and associated mortality of otherwise legally harvested fish. Through its discussions and through its actions, the Council does not expect nor intend for fishermen to target halibut. In the case of 4A, we actually had some information on incidental catch rates. As you know, part of that discussion and part of the way we manage other fisheries is with the maximum retainable MRA allowance that would limit the amount of retention. We did not have any information on what that number would or could or Gulf of Alaska. So in essence, the Council's action would allow for the retention of halibut, assuming the Commission made such allowance. Now, for the purposes of what we did, if you took that complementary action, and if I stumble on this, I get some help from Glenn or Rachel, but I do have a significant correction to make in the letter that I sent you. It would be the Council's intent, if you went forward with that allowance, to closely monitor this fishery, gather data on the incidental catch of halibut, and consider, in coordination with this body, with the Commission, establishing an MRA in the future if it appears to be warranted. The next to the last paragraph in my letter is what I want to clarify, and this is a result of not conferring with staff enough before you hit the send button. But in essence, the other alternative is to not allow retention of halibut. But ideally, under that scenario, we would set a timeline for future consideration after we have collected information on incidental catch rates, gear selectivity, etc. Now, the second alternative that I list in this letter is the one that's in error. Essentially can ignore it, because if you don't allow such retention, we will go forward, the agency will go forward with the allowance for longline pot gear simply without the halibut retention option. So that's what would happen under that scenario. But ideally, under that scenario, we would come back or could come back at some point and consider allowing some level of retention. But again, that's in essence really where we're at. And so we believe that we can accomplish the same intent by allowing retention, monitoring the incidental catch rates, and again, in coordination with you, establishing an MRA if and when data indicates that limiting retention is warranted.
Thank you very much. So can you remind us, in the event that we adopt the idea where you monitor it and then come back and set an appropriate MRA, what's that time like there once we notice is it a couple of years or is it sort of? I'm
assuming, Dr. Balsiger, we would want at least a year, if not two, of data before we move forward with that. And then we would have to go through a regulatory process to implement that MRA. So my guesstimate would be 2 to 3 years.
Thank you. Any questions of Chris? Bob?
Chris, one of the decision points there on allowing pots for sablefish in the bycatch. The way that regulation is going to be developed basically would allow someone to use pots for directing fishery for halibut. It doesn't restrict it to having fishing necessarily for sablefish. Do you agree with that, or is that, am I interpreting the reg inaccurately?
I'm sorry, Mr. Alverson, I did not understand.
Okay, well, the actions of the council are recommending an allowance of halibut to be retained allegedly in the sablefish pots. But the way the motion was made by Duncan Fields and adopted, you could interpret that as a commercial fisherman. I think that I could just take pots and target halibut. I don't necessarily have to catch sablefish with that reg change.
I suppose you could. I don't know how. I'm not an expert, know how viable pot fishery is for targeting halibut, but certainly you would be limited to your IFQ. But I guess one could.
So I know that the council went through heard a lot of testimony and concerns of conflict of gear on the ground just for sablefish, and so that nuance bothers me, that someone might start using 500-pound king crab pots in 40 fathoms for halibut. I don't know if that would work or not, but I was just trying to get a clarification that that's a possibility if we go along with exactly what the council voted on. That
I don't know if there's a legal size limit for sablefish pot gear. I'd probably treading into area where I'm better off not commenting because I don't know the answer. But theoretically, I think you're right, Mr. Alverson.
Okay. Thank you. I presume that some of that could be part of the monitoring too, depending on how worried you were about getting a directed fishery and preempting grounds. But and Rachel, Ms. Baker, do you have some help for us?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have much to say other than to follow up on your last point. The regulations as we're currently drafting them would not have specifications for the pot gear. So I think that's your question.
Okay, so I think we understand that issue. Bruce, do you have a comment?
Sort of a request for clarification. Maybe Rachel, don't go away. Just from the perspective of it's presently you're drafting the regs right now, and I assume, and this is a question I guess for both of you on this, if the commission were to suggest a specific period over which you could gather data that then you would come back and then review the sort of MRA process, is that something that can currently be contemplated as part of the reg writing, or is that in contravention of the council's intent? That's kind of a clarification question.
I don't think that would be in contravention to the council's intent. I think they viewed that as one way to approach this, but I don't know whether you actually can put a time certain in the regs. That part I'm a little vague on.
Thank you. I'm just thinking about that for a minute. Yeah, that's right. I believe if the only thing we could really do is sort of sunset perhaps the authorization of the requirement for a time certain, and then it would be we would examine potentially an MRA, and then so each action has to stand on its own that we approve, and so we'd have to approve the action to authorize longline pot gear, authorize halibut retention until some date at which it would be reconsidered.
Okay, thank you. So, Steve.
Just one comment from the web audience, and that's from Linda Bankin. A data request. Please provide commissioners and industry with any data available on halibut bycatch in the sablefish fishery, both on hook and line and in pots. In our experience, the numbers are extremely low, and an MRA should be very low, if allowed at all. There are data available from past council analyses. Thank you.
I do believe the discussion paper that has just recently been completed has some of that information in it.
Thanks, Bob.
So, Chris, could you confirm when you think that this reg will go into place? I was hopeful that it would go into place sometime in 2016, but there's a question of when. And should the commission allow a MRA or just allow carte blanche halibut to be taken to pots, would either one of those actions slow up implementation?
Glenn or Rachel might be able to help on the timing. The best information I've had in our latest discussion is mid-2016 for this going on the books, if you will. Now, I don't think we have the ability or the time to put that in place with an MRA this year. So that, that gets part of my letter that was an error. I was saying, well, if we wanted to do an MRA, it would delay implementation because we would have to develop that. But it was the council's intent to go forward with the allowance for pot gear for saleable fish with or without a halibut allowance.
Thank you very much. I think that's very clear, and I think this is a well-motivated action. There's these little picky things on the side we want to take care of, so hopefully we can get around those things. Anything else on this? Bob.
So Bruce, I remember when I wasn't on a commission, but the commission approved something like this in Canada for retention of halibut. Of course, I don't understand what DFO had to do with it complimentary on their side, but if the commission in January were to agree to a level of an MRA, does the council then have to go through a regulatory process to do that too, or could we do it quicker and implement it for 2016 through IPHC regs?
That's a very good question, Bob, and I maybe turn to Rachel and Chris on this. If the commission specified it as part of its regulations and the U.S. government accepted those regulations, then it would become part of federal law. That's my understanding of the process. But I think the typical thing that we always really try to avoid is any contravention in regulations between what the commission has and so forth. And that would be up to then the U.S. government to approve that. If the U.S. government received such a recommendation from the commission and approved it, that's a really good question about how that sits in federal law. If the U.S. government accepted it, typically it becomes U.S. federal law. So I don't know what would happen in that case, Rachel.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bruce, at a staff level, we have talked about that very thing with regard to the Area 4A proposal that Chris mentioned earlier. And we think conceptually it could work for the MRA to be implemented through the Commission's annual management measures, and it potentially might give you a little more flexibility from year to year if you receive new data that would suggest changes in the MRA. But I think Bruce characterized it exactly correctly. There is always that tension in the U.S. acceptance of the management measures and trying not to put things in there that might jeopardize that. And then there's also just the procedural aspect of, if this is the council's management program in theory, and so they may be very interested in specifying what that MRA is, and so just working that out between the two bodies, I think, would be an important coordination.
Okay. Rachel, did you say couldn't or could?
Which part, sorry?
You said you looked at this at a staff level?
Oh, sorry. Yes, I probably didn't articulate. We think conceptually the Commission could implement an MRA through the annual management measures.
Mr. Chairman? Yes. So if we did this, from an industry standpoint, I'd like the regulations to be the same from Attu to Dixon entrance and not have any difference in 4A. Can we, for our annual meeting, have some discussion or have the staff help us on that?
Yeah, I think so. Commissioner Alverson, I think the analysis that the council did for retention in area 4A would directly inform that understanding. If you were looking for consistency across there, then because that regulation already exists, whatever you did would have to be consistent with that regulation if that's your intent.
Well, I don't know where I'll be on this issue in January, but I don't know, are we hamstrung to only the option in 4A, or can we're not? Okay, so we could do something throughout the range.
And this, if I can, Mr. Chair, and this is what Rachel was referring to earlier about trying to avoid the tension between the regulations on this, is that if the MRA that the Commission approved was more restrictive than the MRA that currently exists for the Aleutian Islands, there would be a conflict between the two regulations. I would think that in that case, the advice to the U.S. government from its staff would be, we can't accept this regulation because it's in conflict with an existing regulation we have, or we'd have to change that regulation.
Could be more liberal?
Yes. If it was more liberal than what you approved, then because of the relationship between the convention and the U.S. government, either contracting party can adopt regulations that are more conservative but not more liberal than what's approved by the Commission.
Well, I think there needs to be a little work on this, but I think we understand the questions now at least, so maybe we can hopefully get that straightened out so we'll have some clarity at the annual meeting and at the council meeting. So thanks for leading that discussion, Bob, and thank you, Chris. The letter was really good. I thought I actually didn't catch the thing next to the last paragraph. So
anyway, I'm just going to comment. I'm glad we had this discussion because there are some questions that have come up that we can hopefully answer at the annual meeting.
Yeah, great. Any other commissioners on this? Thanks a lot. So I believe, Steve, that cues up your discussion of what's going to happen third week of January.
Okay. Great, thanks. This is just a brief introduction to the annual meeting in another month and a half's time in Juneau, just to let everybody know what the schedule looks like and kind of how things will be running. The schedule looks very similar to the last couple of annual meetings. The meeting is the week of the 25th to the 29th of January in Juneau. We'll be at the Centennial Hall Convention Center in Juneau. And I wanted to note that the Alaska Young Fishermen's Summit is also going to be taking place in Juneau on Wednesday through Friday of the same week. So we will see them coming and going during the course of our meeting. So as the schedule ran last year, the public sessions open on Monday, the 25th of January, and that will be the traditional staff reports with the state of the fishery, the assessment, and the harvest decision table, much as we started with yesterday here. The public sessions continue on Tuesday morning, where we'll talk about survey expansion, MSAB. The agenda here will likely change based on the discussion here at the interim meeting, and it will be posted at the website as each time it gets updated. In the afternoon of Tuesday is when the Commission begins its administrative sessions and the advisory bodies begin their own sections, the Conference Board and the Processor Advisory Group. The Commission will be hearing the 2A reports and 2B reports on Tuesday afternoon, and then Wednesday morning they'll continue with the Alaska reports. And the Conference Board and PAG will continue meeting on Wednesday. The administrative session in the afternoon on Wednesday for the Commission will be focused on science. That may change a little bit, but basically that's where we'll talk about the SRB and the research program. And then late in the afternoon, the commission will be finishing up their finance and administration. On Thursday will be the usual Thursday schedule. It'll open with a joint session of the commission, the conference board, and the processor advisory group. And the advisory bodies will present their recommendations to the commission, and then the commission will consider the harvest decision table and all the regulatory proposals. And that will basically run through the day on Thursday. You'll see there's a note about conference board and PAG possibly meeting with the MSAB at some point during the course of the meeting. That hasn't been decided yet exactly how they may want to do that, but at some point, as Adam and Michelle mentioned yesterday, they'll probably have some sort of interaction with the advisory bodies and the MSAB. Then Friday morning is the last public session at which all the decisions are made. As I mentioned, all of the information about the annual meeting will be updated as it becomes available on the web page. The documents for the meeting will be posted as they become available. Of course, the RARA and the Blue Book will be posted before the annual meeting. If you go to the website now, you'll be able to see there are discounts available for the 2 hotels as well as Alaska Airlines for flying to Juneau. So make your reservations now. Some of those discounts are only good for a couple more weeks. And that's all I have right now, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions from the commissioners? I see none. Thank you. It's not dissimilar. So this brings us to our public comment, public question part of this morning's session. We have taken a few off the web, so let's see if there's anyone in the room right now that has a comment or a question. I see none, so Steve, can we confirm that no last questions came in on the webinar while you were speaking? Still clear. So Bruce.
I just wanted to, if I can, Mr. Chair, take some liberty. Did you get your question? I was talking to Rob Jones because you asked a question yesterday about the survey expansion. Did you get that question answered? I did. Okay. Okay, thanks you.
Thank you very much. So we are nearing completion, so I would ask the Canadian side if they have any comments they would care to make at this time.
Thanks very much, Jim. The only comment I would make, well, I make 2. One, it's encouraging to see from the stock assessment report that Ian did and provided to the Commission yesterday. I note that he is cautious about how he words what we could see as far as some optimism in the stock as far as not declining any further and maybe some indication of it increasing, which I think we probably all find quite helpful to see that potentially occurring. And also I was quite struck by the change in the probabilities that I saw in the decision tables that we had presented as well yesterday, that they were more optimistic given what I just said previously. I think it will be a very intense meeting. I looking at the schedule that we just saw from Steve. It's packed with the usual items. There's some new ones, and around the regulatory proposals, I understand from you, Bruce, that you will be providing us the staff's views on those at the annual meeting as usual. So I'm very much looking forward to that session in Juneau and furthering the work of the Commission. I would just like to make a personal note about, I understand that this is Mr. Lane's last meeting, I think, is that correct? And would like to just offer, it was very much a pleasure working with you, Don, over the last couple of years, and the work that you did is clearly you have a passion for halibut and the work of the Commission itself, and so I wish you all the best in your future endeavors.
Yeah, no, and I just wanted to thank you for your efforts and outreach, coming down to Olympia, talking with our fisheries director, come to our association meetings, and the activity you did in Alaska, I think, spoke well of your passion to bring in the stakeholders. So thank you.
Thanks, Bob. And so for my part, I knew who Don was 2 years ago, but I didn't really know him. So I've got to be good friends with him, and he has been a different kind of commissioner. He's been everywhere, you know, from DC to our congressional offices, as Bob said, to Olympia, to association meetings. He's been in Area 4E. He's talked to the Coastal Village people. He's been everywhere. So it's a different kind of commissioner. It's hard to find a model that you could look at that would say, this is what we want a commissioner to be and to do. He's taken everything to heart, and I've actually rarely ever seen him without a smile on his face. So it's so much easier to deal with people. Of course, I've never been on his boat, so I don't know how that works. But so I am pleased, and I'm a better person for having known Don. It was a great job. I don't think this is the last we'll see of him, and so thank you for what you've done, Don. And I'm going to give you the gavel, and you can say what you would want and close this meeting when you see fit.
Well, thank you for those kind words, Paul. It means a lot to me. As everyone knows, this is my last meeting, and it's been my term as a Halibut commissioner has been a personal challenge that I've greatly enjoyed. I want to congratulate Jeff Kaufman for his pending appointment as the Alaska Halibut Commissioner. I've known Jeff for quite some time, and I have great respect and appreciation for his dedication and his involvement in the fisheries in Alaska, and I think him and his family should be justifiably proud for this accomplishment, to be a Halibut Commissioner. During my term as a Halibut Commissioner, as you've heard, I was one of my personal goals was to take this opportunity to meet as many people in the halibut industry as I could in the term of outreach. And in that endeavor, I'd like to thank a few people that were particularly helpful. Peggy Parker was always gracious and helpful to help Bob and I both meet with the HANA members. And what I learned in that endeavor was that's a difficult job for Peggy to get all of those HANA members in one place at one time, and she did it wonderful, was very good at it, and helped Bob and I both meet and converse with the processor side of the halibut industry, which is a very important part of what we do here. Particularly like to say thank you to Bob Alverson, Commissioner Alverson. He has been a long-standing member in the fishing industry, and through his contacts and his interest, he was graciously allowed me to meet people in Washington and state government that I would probably not get to meet and not get to work with, and that really helped me do my job the way I thought I would like to do it. So Bob, thank you for that. Thank you for coming to Alaska. I got to meet with the Seattle Longline Fleet, which is not always on the same page as the Alaskan fishermen. There's a historical tension between Seattle and Alaska, and that was helpful. And in return, I got to introduce Bob to the sport charter industry associations in Alaska. So I know that we both became more informed and better enriched by those experiences. I'd like to thank Dr. Lehman and his staff, the exemplary staff. I call and ask a question or ask for a resource, attendance at a meeting, and very responsive and very helpful, and I appreciate that. I appreciate Dr. Stewart and Dr. Martinelli answering my silly questions. I know that you enjoy being teachers, and I was a ripe student at the elementary level. So I appreciate you taking the time to explain to me what I'm sure you thought were very simple concepts. So that was great. But finally, I'd like to say thank you for the people that come to these meetings from the industry and the public. I'm acutely aware of the time, the cost in time, and the cost in treasure to come sit to this meeting to gather this information and talk to other members in the industry and help us formulate management, existing management, and then future management of this resource. This resource has been part of our histories for thousands of years. And taking the time and the money to come to these meetings, as my role in a commissioner, it's absolutely critical to help us make these decisions that affect all of us. And so I want to say thank you to the people that take the time to listen to the web, and thank you to the people that come to these meetings and speak. So with that.
So what do the commissioners want to do about our next meeting? Right till 12:30? Okay, so let's start at 11. Can we close everything else down by that quickly?
Start at 11.
Okay, we'll get a head start on it then at 11.
Mr. Lane, I feel compelled to complete an answer that you did not give. The gear is too big for some.